It was a Wednesday night when everything shifted. The air felt strange. Too heavy, too quiet. I was sitting at the kitchen table, mindlessly scrolling through my phone while a pot of water boiled on the stove. Lisa was upstairs, getting ready for what she claimed was another networking dinner with her team. At least that's what she had told me. The truth? Something about her story had felt off for weeks. The sudden rush to leave, the last-minute changes in plans, the way she'd stopped complaining about her annoying coworker Matt and started dropping his name a little too casually in conversation. Matt thought of this great pitch, or Matt said I should try this place for lunch. At first, I ignored it, but on that Wednesday night, a single stupid detail broke everything wide open. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She was upstairs, so I glanced at it instinctively. One message from Matt. I knew it was wrong, but I grabbed the phone anyway. The screen lit up as I swiped to reveal the message. Tonight's going to be unforgettable. Can't wait to see you. My stomach dropped. The words didn't make sense at first, like trying to read a sentence in a foreign language. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. She'd been lying to me. For how long? I heard her footsteps upstairs, her heels clicking against the floorboards as she walked into our bedroom. It was automatic. My heart racing. I put her phone back where it was and turned away. Couldn't let her see me yet. I needed to know more. Instead of waiting for her to leave, I grabbed my keys and left the house, telling her I had to run an errand. I parked my car down the street where I could see the driveway but wouldn't be noticed. My heart pounded as I watched her walk out the front door, perfectly dressed, her favorite trench coat tied at the waist. She didn't look like someone going to a casual work dinner. She looked like someone on a date. My suspicions were confirmed when she didn't head toward the downtown business district where her office was. Instead, she drove to a boutique hotel on the edge of town. I didn't follow her inside. Couldn't. The idea of seeing her with someone else made me want to vomit. But sitting there in the darkened car, my mind raced through every possible scenario. The lies, the secrecy, the way she'd pull her phone away when I sat too close. It all fit. I just didn't want it to. I stayed in that parking lot for an hour, the minutes dragging as I tried to piece together what to do next. Finally, when I couldn't take it anymore, I drove home. When she got back that night, I was still at the kitchen table. Her heels clicked against the tile as she entered, carrying the faint smell of that new perfume she'd been wearing. "You're still up?" she asked, her tone light, almost casual. "I couldn't sleep," I replied, not looking at her. My hands were gripping the edge of the table, knuckles white. She poured herself a glass of water and sat across from me, her eyes darting between my face and her phone, which was still sitting where she'd left it. "How was dinner?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It was fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Just a lot of work talk. You know how it is." "Do I?" I asked, finally meeting her gaze. My voice was sharper now, cutting through the false calm. Her smile faltered. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stared at her, trying to decide whether to confront her right then or wait until I had more proof. The words from Matt's text echoed in my head. "Tonight's going to be unforgettable." My stomach churned. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I bit my tongue. Instead, I stood up and walked past her, heading for the bedroom without another word. If she felt any guilt or fear, she didn't show it. She didn't even try to stop me. I didn't sleep that night, and by morning, I knew one thing. I was going to find out the truth, no matter what it cost. What I didn't realize was how messy things would get once I did. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. My mind had been racing all night, and I was done being passive. If Lisa wanted to play games, I'd meet her at the board. She was already up, sitting at the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone like it was any ordinary day. She barely acknowledged me as I entered the room. "Morning," she said absently, not looking up. "Morning," I replied, keeping my voice even. "What time did you get back last night?" "Not too late," she answered, her voice light but distant. "Why?" I shrugged. "Just curious." Her hand froze for the briefest moment, her thumb hovering over the screen. Then she continued scrolling, her expression perfectly neutral. But that tiny hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I went through the motions of getting ready for work, but I didn't head to the office. Instead, I called in sick and drove straight to the hotel I'd seen her at the night before. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I couldn't shake the image of her walking through those glass doors like she belonged there. At the front desk, I played it cool. "Hi, I'm looking for my wife. She might have left something here last night. Lisa Adams? Room number." The receptionist, a young guy who couldn't have been more than 25, hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't give out guest information." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Look, I know how this sounds. I just want to make sure she's okay. She came home acting strange, and I'm worried about her." His expression softened, and I could see the doubt creeping in. Finally, he nodded. "I can't give you the room number, but I can tell you she checked out this morning." "Alone?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. The receptionist glanced around, as if making sure no one was listening. "No, she left with someone." My chest tightened. "Tall guy? Brown hair?" He nodded. "That's the one." I muttered a quick thank you and left before my anger got the better of me. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I drove, the sound of my own breathing drowning out the radio. I wasn't just angry, I was livid, but I couldn't lose control. Not yet. When I got home, Lisa was still there, lounging on the couch in leggings and a sweatshirt, her hair tied up like she didn't have a care in the world. The sheer normalcy of it made my blood boil. "Hey, you're back early," she said, looking up from her phone. "Yeah," I replied, my voice flat. Work was slow. I stood there for a moment, just watching her. She was so casual, so comfortable, like she hadn't spent the night in some hotel with her colleague. "I was thinking we could do something tonight," I said, forcing a smile. She raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Dinner. Just us. Maybe that Italian place you like." Lisa hesitated, and I could see the gears turning in her head. "I don't know. I'm pretty tired." "Come on," I said, stepping closer. "It's been a while since we had a proper date night." Her lips curled into a tight smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Sure, why not?" I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Great, I'll make a reservation." But I wasn't taking her to dinner. Not yet. First, I needed more proof. That afternoon, while she was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through her phone. I wasn't proud of it, but at this point, pride was a luxury I couldn't afford. And there it was, a text thread with Matt. Deleted, but not completely wiped. She must have forgotten about the cloud sync. The messages were like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. I'm counting down the days until the retreat. Just us, no distractions." He has no idea, does he? My vision blurred. I scrolled further, but I didn't need to. The truth was staring me in the face. This wasn't just a fling. This was an affair. A full-blown betrayal with no hesitation, no remorse. And that last message? It wasn't just about me. It was about respect, about dignity, about the fact that she'd looked me in the eye every day and lied to my face without a shred of guilt. When she came out of the shower, towel wrapped around her, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, her phone in my hand. "What the hell is this?" I asked, my voice calm but icy. Her smile faltered. "Why are you going through my phone?" "Answer the question, Lisa," I said, standing up. "Who the hell is Matt? And why is he telling you last night was amazing?" Her face went pale, and for the first time, she looked genuinely scared. But then, like a switch, her expression hardened. "You went through my messages? That's disgusting, Nate," she snapped, crossing her arms. "Don't turn this around on me," I said, my voice rising. "I saw the texts, Lisa. I saw the hotel. How long has this been going on?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. For a moment, I thought she might actually tell the truth. But then she said, "It's not what you think." I laughed bitterly. "Really? Because it looks like you've been screwing your coworker behind my back." "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling now. "It's complicated." "It's not complicated," I snapped. "It's betrayal. Plain and simple." She stared at me, her eyes narrowing. "Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have needed someone else." Her words hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. Instead, I stared her down, letting the silence stretch until she finally looked away. "This isn't over," I said quietly, stepping past her and out of the room. And in that moment, I knew two things. I was done playing the fool, and Lisa had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The house felt like a pressure cooker the next day. Lisa avoided me completely, flitting from room to room like a shadow. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by something raw and unsteady. But I didn't care. My anger had burned through the shock, leaving me with a cold clarity. I was done asking questions. It was time to take control. Lisa was in the kitchen when I finally spoke. I leaned against the doorway, my arms crossed, and said, "We need to talk. Now." She froze mid-pour, the orange juice cascading into her glass. Her back was to me, but I could see her shoulders tense. "I already said everything I needed to say," she replied, her voice tight. "Then you better think of something new." I shot back. She turned to face me, her glass in hand, her expression defiant. "What do you want, Nate? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. Are you happy now?" Her nonchalance was gasoline on a fire. I stepped closer, my voice low but sharp. "Sorry doesn't cut it. You cheated. You lied. You brought another man into our lives and acted like I was too stupid to notice." She rolled her eyes, the arrogance creeping back. "Don't act like you're perfect. You've been emotionally checked out for years." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, so this is my fault now? You don't get to rewrite history, Lisa. I wasn't the one sneaking off to hotels and sending dirty texts." Her eyes flared. "You think this is easy for me? You think I wanted it to be like this?" I stepped back, stunned by the audacity. "Wanted it? Lisa, you didn't stumble into this. You chose it. Over and over again." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. Then, she placed the glass down and folded her arms. "Fine," she said, her voice icy. "You want the truth? I'll give it to you. Matt makes me feel alive. He listens to me, he sees me, and he doesn't treat me like some accessory you dust off when it's convenient." Her words were like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. I stared at her, my chest heaving, and said the first thing that came to mind. "Then why the hell are you still here?" She blinked, caught off guard. For a second, I thought she might actually leave. But instead, she smirked. An infuriating, condescending smirk that made my blood boil. "Because I've built too much here to walk away," she said. "This house, this life, is mine too. And you're not going to just push me out." Her entitlement was staggering. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You've got some nerve, Lisa. You break every promise we ever made. And now you think you're going to call the shots." She shrugged, her tone dismissive. "You're overreacting. People have affairs all the time. It doesn't have to mean anything." That was it. The breaking point. I stepped closer, my voice a dangerous whisper. "Let me make this clear. You don't get to decide what this means. You don't get to destroy our marriage and then act like it's just another bad day at work." She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "And don't even think about playing the victim. You want to feel alive? Congratulations, Lisa. You just killed us." Her face twisted in anger, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of a response. I turned and walked out the door, slamming it behind me. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I drove aimlessly for hours, the weight of everything pressing down on me like a storm cloud. Betrayal, anger, heartbreak. It all churned together in a toxic brew. But as the day stretched on, another emotion took root. Resolve. Lisa wanted to play games? Fine. Play too. But I wasn't going to sit around and let her dictate the rules. The first thing I did was call Josh. He'd been my best friend since college and the one person I could trust to tell me the hard truths. "Dude, what's going on?" he asked after picking up. "Lisa's cheating," I said bluntly. There was a pause. "What? Are you serious?" "Dead serious. I've got the texts to prove it. And a witness at the hotel she was at with Matt." Josh swore under his breath. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I'm not letting her walk all over me. I need a plan." Josh hesitated. "Look, man, I know you're pissed, but don't do anything crazy. This is your marriage we're talking about. Was my marriage? I corrected. That night, I returned home, my mind clear for the first time in days. Lisa was on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. She didn't even look up when I walked in. I sat across from her, my voice calm but firm. Here's how this is going to go. You pack a bag and leave tonight, or I'll make sure everyone, your friends, your family, your job, knows exactly who you are. Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I said, holding her gaze. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't move. This is my house too. You can't just kick me out. I leaned back, a cold smile on my lips. Watch me. She didn't pack that night, but she would. I'd make sure of it. Lisa had underestimated me for the last time. The next morning, I woke up with a razor-sharp determination. Lisa's refusal to leave wasn't just defiance. It was a challenge. And if she thought she could outsmart me, she had no idea who she was dealing with. She was already gone when I came downstairs, likely at work or pretending to be. The silence in the house was unnerving, but it gave me space to think. This wasn't just about ending the marriage anymore. It was about showing her that she couldn't toy with me and walk away unscathed. I started with the finances. Lisa was smug about how much she'd contributed to the house, but she never paid attention to the paperwork. That was my domain. I pulled up our accounts, combing through every expense and investment we'd made together. Then I called our lawyer. Hey, Nate, Alan said, his tone cautious. What's going on? I need to start the divorce process, I replied bluntly. And I need it done in a way that leaves her with as little leverage as possible. Alan hesitated. This isn't like you. Are you sure about this? She's been cheating on me? I said, cutting him off. With some guy from her office. I've got proof. Texts, hotel receipts, the works. Alan sighed. All right, if that's the case, we've got options. Do you want to go nuclear? Absolutely, I said without hesitation. She's not walking away from this clean. Over the next few hours, Alan laid out a strategy. We'd focus on her infidelity, which gave me the upper hand in dividing assets. I wouldn't just win, I'd bury her. That afternoon, I took the next step. Lisa's phone was still synced to the home's cloud storage, which meant I had access to more than just her texts. Photos, emails, even her calendar, everything was at my fingertips. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. In one of her email folders, buried under a dozen subfolders, was a thread titled Retreat Plans. It wasn't work-related. It was her and Matt coordinating a weekend getaway to some lake cabin. Romantic dinners, boat rides, everything. And the dates? Just 2 weeks away. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling with fury. She wasn't just lying to me. She was planning her next move right under my nose. That's when the idea hit me. I forwarded the entire thread to her boss. Then, for good measure, I included Matt's supervisor. The subject line was simple: inappropriate conduct between employees. I didn't add a message. The emails spoke for themselves. Lisa came home that evening, oblivious to the storm I'd unleashed. She walked into the kitchen, dropping her purse on the counter. Hey, she said casually, as if nothing was wrong. Hey, I replied, not looking up from my laptop. She poured herself a glass of wine, humming under her breath. The audacity of it, acting so carefree when she turned our marriage into a circus, made my blood boil. But I stayed calm. Anything interesting happened today? I asked, my tone deceptively light. She glanced at me, suspicious. No, just work stuff. I nodded, fighting the urge to smile. Good. I've been thinking a lot about our situation. Oh? She said, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, I've decided to stop fighting. I lied. If you want to stay here while we figure things out, that's fine. But we both need space. Her eyes narrowed. What are you up to? Nothing, I said with a shrug. Just trying to make this easier for both of us. She didn't trust me. Smart, considering what was coming. But she didn't press the issue. The fallout began the next morning. I was sipping coffee when Lisa's phone buzzed on the counter. She grabbed it, her face instantly pale as she read whatever message had just come through. What's wrong? I asked, feigning concern. She didn't answer, her fingers flying across the screen as she typed a response. Another buzz, then another. Finally, she cursed under her breath. What happened? I pressed, my voice calm but laced with mock curiosity. She slammed the phone down, glaring at me. Someone sent emails to my boss and Matt's. They know about everything. Wow, I said, raising an eyebrow. That's rough. Her eyes narrowed. You did this. Why would I do that? I replied, keeping my tone innocent. You said it didn't mean anything, just a little fun, right? So why would it matter if people found out? Her face flushed with anger, but I could see the panic creeping in. You don't understand. This could ruin my career. And, I said, leaning back in my chair, you didn't seem too worried about my feelings. Why should I care about your job? She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She looked like a trapped animal, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. I told you, I continued, my voice growing colder. This isn't over. You wanted to play games? Now it's my turn. She grabbed her phone and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. By the end of the day, the fallout had spread. Josh called me, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. Dude, Lisa's office is a dumpster fire right now, he said. Everyone's talking about her and Matt. HR is involved, and apparently their client found out too. It's chaos. Good, I replied simply. You really went for it, huh? I'm just getting started, I said, my voice steady. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming control, about making sure Lisa understood that actions have consequences. And as far as I was concerned, her lesson had only just begun. The days that followed were a masterclass in watching someone unravel. Lisa's perfect, polished exterior began to crack, and underneath it was chaos. She spent hours pacing the house, phone glued to her ear, alternating between frantic whispers and barely controlled shouting. You don't understand, she hissed during one call I overheard. It wasn't serious. I'll fix this, I swear. I didn't ask who she was talking to, her boss, Matt, HR, maybe all three. But I knew the damage was done. The email I'd sent had spread like wildfire. She hadn't just crossed a line. She'd torched the whole map. But Lisa wasn't the kind to go down quietly. The confrontation came that Friday night. I was in the living room, pretending to watch TV, when she stormed in, her face flushed with anger. She was still wearing her office clothes, though her blazer was wrinkled, and her makeup had smudged. What the hell is wrong with you? She snapped, standing in front of me like a general addressing her troops. I muted the TV and leaned back, pretending to be bored. You're going to have to be more specific. She clenched her fists, her voice trembling with fury. Don't play dumb. You sabotaged me. You sent those emails and ruined everything. I tilted my head, feigning innocence. Ruined everything? I just forwarded a few emails. If what they said caused problems, maybe that's on you, not me. Her eyes blazed, and for a moment, I thought she might actually hit me. But instead, she took a deep breath, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You think you've won, don't you? She said. You think this makes you some kind of hero? I stood up, towering over her, and leaned in close. Hero? No. But I'm not the villain in this story, Lisa. That title's all yours. She flinched but quickly recovered, her defiance returning. You're pathetic. A real man wouldn't stoop this low. A real wife wouldn't cheat. I shot back. That hit a nerve. She turned on her heel and marched out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. The next day, I got a call from Matt's wife. Her voice was calm, almost eerily so, but there was an undercurrent of exhaustion I recognized all too well. Is this Nate? Yes, I replied cautiously. Who's this? Claire, she said. Matt's wife, or maybe soon-to-be ex-wife, depending on how this plays out. I sat down, gripping the phone tighter. How did you get my number? Lisa's emails, she replied, her voice sharp. After the HR mess started, I went looking for answers. I found plenty. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed silent. I just wanted to thank you, Claire continued, for exposing them. I had my suspicions, but I didn't have proof until now. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, I said finally, meaning it. She sighed. Don't be. They made their choices. Now we get to make ours. Her words stuck with me long after we hung up. Claire was right. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about deciding what came next. That night, Lisa came home drunk. I heard her stumbling in, the sound of her heels clattering against the hardwood floor. When I walked into the living room, she was sprawled on the couch, a half-empty bottle of wine in one hand and her phone in the other. "Guess who got suspended?" she slurred, waving the phone like a trophy. "Me. HR said I violated professional ethics. Can you believe that?" I crossed my arms, staring down at her. "You violated a lot more than that, Lisa." She laughed bitterly, taking another swig of wine. "You're loving this, aren't you? Watching me fall apart. It makes you feel powerful." "Powerful?" I said, my voice steady. "No. It makes me feel like I finally see you for who you really are." She glared at me, her eyes glassy with alcohol and anger. "And who's that?" "A liar," I said coldly. "A cheater. Someone who can't take responsibility for her own actions." She threw the wine bottle, narrowly missing me as it shattered against the wall. The red liquid dripped down like blood, staining the white paint. "Get out," I said quietly, my voice like steel. She froze, her bravado faltering. "What? You heard me?" I said, pointing toward the door. "I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here tonight. Pack a bag and leave." Her lip curled in defiance. "You can't kick me out. This is my house too." "Not anymore," I replied. "You forfeited that when you decided to sleep with someone else. Now get out before I call the cops." For a moment I thought she might fight me on it. But then she grabbed her purse, wobbling slightly as she stood. "This isn't over," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Yes, it is," I replied, slamming the door behind her as she left. When the house was finally quiet, I sank onto the couch, staring at the mess she'd left behind. The broken glass, the wine-stained wall, it felt like a metaphor for everything we'd built. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel angry. I felt free. Lisa had burned our life to the ground, but now the ashes were mine to rebuild. And I wasn't looking back. The silence in the house felt heavy the next morning, like the calm after a storm. Lisa hadn't come back, and I wasn't about to check where she went. For the first time in weeks, I woke up without the knot of tension in my chest. I grabbed my phone and opened my messages. There was one from Josh. "How are you holding up? Heard Lisa's work is in chaos. Call me if you need anything." It was comforting, but I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I scrolled to the photos I'd saved from Lisa's emails, screenshots of her conversations with Matt, the booking confirmation for their retreat, and a few overly flirtatious selfies she'd sent him. This wasn't over. Not until I set the record straight with everyone she'd dragged into her mess. By mid-morning, I was sitting at the local cafe, sipping black coffee as I waited for my guests to arrive. Claire had agreed to meet me, and I wasn't sure what to expect. She walked in a few minutes later, dressed sharply but with an edge of exhaustion in her eyes. "Thanks for meeting," I said as she sat down across from me. She nodded, brushing her blonde hair out of her face. I figured it was time we compared notes. For the next hour, we laid everything out. Claire told me about Matt's lies, the late-night work trips, the unexplained expenses, the way he'd started treating her like an inconvenience. In return, I showed her the texts and emails I'd uncovered. "So, it wasn't just me," she said bitterly, staring at the damning messages. "I thought maybe I'd missed something, that it was my fault. But no, they just didn't care." "They didn't," I agreed. "They were sloppy because they thought they could get away with it." Claire tapped her nails against the table, her expression hardening. "Matt doesn't know I've seen these yet. He still thinks he can smooth this over. But he's wrong." "What are you going to do?" I asked. She smirked, a glint of steel in her eyes. "Divorce him, for starters. And I'll make sure his reputation matches his actions. He's not just losing me, he's losing everything." I raised my coffee cup in a mock toast. "Here's to starting over." She clinked her water glass against it, a faint smile breaking through the bitterness. "Here's to that." When I got home, Lisa's car was back in the driveway. My mood immediately soured, but I walked inside, bracing for whatever mess she'd brought with her. She was sitting at the dining table, her hair a mess, dark circles under her eyes. A suitcase sat by the door, half-zipped with clothes spilling out. "We need to talk," she said, her voice hoarse. "Do we?" I asked coldly, tossing my keys onto the counter. She flinched at my tone but didn't back down. "Look, I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But this doesn't have to end like this." I let out a bitter laugh. "You're kidding, right? Lisa, you destroyed our marriage. You humiliated me. You think we can just sweep that under the rug?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. "I don't know what I was thinking," she said. "I got caught up in something that wasn't real. I wasn't myself." "That's the thing, Lisa," I said, stepping closer. "You were exactly yourself. This is who you are. Selfish, manipulative, cruel." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "I was lost, Nate. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. It felt like we were just coexisting." "And whose fault is that?" I snapped. "I gave you everything, Lisa. Trust, love, a home. And instead of working through it, you decided to blow it all up because some guy gave you attention." She broke then, sobbing into her hands. But I didn't reach out to comfort her. "Not this time. I don't know how to fix this," she said through her tears. "I don't want to lose everything we've built." I crossed my arms, staring at her coldly. "You didn't just lose it, Lisa. You burned it to the ground. And now you're standing in the ashes, pretending it's salvageable. It's not." Her sobs turned to silence, her body trembling as she realized there was no way out, no redemption. "What do you want me to do?" she whispered finally. "Leave," I said simply. "For good. The divorce papers are coming, and when they do, you'll sign them. You'll take whatever's left of your dignity and go." She nodded, broken. "Fine." She grabbed her suitcase and walked toward the door. But before leaving, she turned back, her eyes filled with one last flicker of defiance. "You think you've won, Nate," she said quietly. "But you'll always wonder if this was partly your fault." Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. "The only thing I'll wonder is why I didn't see through you sooner." The door closed behind her, and just like that, she was gone. I sat down at the dining table, staring at the empty space where Lisa had been. The weight of everything hit me at once. Grief, relief, anger, and a strange sense of calm. It wasn't over yet. The divorce process would be messy, and there was still fallout to deal with. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my life again. Lisa was gone, and the wreckage she'd left behind wasn't mine to clean up. It was hers, and I was finally free. The days after Lisa left were strange. The house was eerily quiet, as if her presence had left a permanent echo in the walls. I should have felt victorious, maybe even triumphant, but all I felt was the raw, hollow weight of everything she destroyed. The wine stain from that night was still smeared across the wall, a glaring reminder of our final confrontation. Could have cleaned it, but I didn't. It felt like a monument to what she'd done, to the chaos she'd unleashed. I threw myself into the logistics of the divorce. Alan had the papers drawn up within days, and the terms were brutal. Lisa wouldn't just lose the house. She'd lose the financial safety net we'd spent years building together. Her job was already on the rocks, and Matt, from what I'd heard, his wife Claire was tearing through his life like a hurricane. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about making sure she understood that actions have consequences. One evening, a few days after she left, I got a call from her mother. "Nate," she began, her voice gentle but heavy with disappointment. "I just heard from Lisa. She's in bad shape." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "And whose fault is that?" She sighed. "I know what she did was wrong, more than wrong, but she's still my daughter. I can't just abandon her." "I didn't abandon her," I said sharply. "She made her choices. She's the one who abandoned this marriage." Her mother hesitated. "She told me about the divorce, about the emails. Nate, she's lost everything. Her job, her reputation. She did that to herself." I interrupted. "I didn't make her cheat. I didn't make her lie. I just made sure the truth came out." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, finally, her mother spoke, her tone soft but firm. "You're right, but be careful, Nate. Holding on to anger doesn't just hurt them. It hurts you too." The call ended, but her words lingered. Was I angry? Of course. But anger wasn't what kept me going anymore. It was something else. That weekend, I met Claire again. We sat at the same cafe, though the energy between us was different this time. There was no bitterness, no rawness. Just two people trying to piece together what came next. "Matt's moving out," she said, stirring her tea. "The lawyer said the divorce should be finalized in a few months." "Same here," I replied. "Lisa's already agreed to the terms." She looked at me, her expression thoughtful. "Do you feel better? Now that it's almost over?" I thought about it for a moment, staring out the window at the people walking by. Better? No. Lighter, maybe. Like I'm not carrying someone else's mistakes anymore. She nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "That's a good way to put it." We talked for hours, sharing stories not just about our exes but about ourselves. Who we were before all this, who we wanted to be now. By the time we parted, there was something unspoken between us. Not romance, not yet, but understanding. A bond forged in shared pain. When I got home, I finally cleaned the wine stain off the wall. It was surprisingly easy, the red fading with each swipe of the sponge until it was gone. I stood there for a long time afterward, staring at the blank, clean surface. It didn't feel like a monument anymore. Felt like a new beginning. I packed up the last of Lisa's things that night. Her clothes, her books, even the stupid knickknacks she'd insisted on buying during every vacation. They all went into boxes stacked neatly by the door. She texted me the next day, "I'll come by this weekend to pick up my stuff." I didn't reply. When Saturday came, I wasn't home when Lisa arrived. I didn't want to see her. Didn't want to hear whatever excuse or half apology she'd prepared. I left her key on the counter and a simple note. "We're done. Don't contact me again unless it's through the lawyer." By the time I got back, she was gone. So were the boxes. And with them, the last remnants of our life together. That night, I sat on the back porch, a beer in hand, staring up at the stars. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that made your breath visible. It felt cleansing, like the universe was reminding me that life moves on. I thought about what I'd learned. About trust, about betrayal, about the strength it takes to rebuild when everything falls apart. Lisa had been a hurricane in my life, tearing through everything I thought was stable. But hurricanes don't last forever. Eventually, the skies clear, and all that's left is the work of rebuilding. I took another sip of beer, a small smile forming on my lips. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't expected, hope. The storm was over, and I was finally ready to move on. The weeks that followed felt like waking up after a long, restless sleep. The house was quieter, yes, but it wasn't empty. It was mine now. Every corner, every wall, every inch of space that Lisa's betrayal had poisoned. Slowly, I began reclaiming it piece by piece. The first thing to go was the bed. I couldn't stand the sight of it anymore. The memories of nights spent lying next to someone who was already gone in spirit. I replaced it with a new one, something simple, comfortable, and mine. The walls, once a soft, neutral tone Lisa had insisted on, became bolder. A deep navy for the living room, a rich olive green for the bedroom. It felt symbolic, a shift from muted complacency to vibrant individuality. I wasn't just moving on. I was rebuilding myself one decision at a time. One afternoon, as I sorted through old photos and belongings, I found our wedding album. My hands hovered over it, the leather cover worn from years of being pulled out at family gatherings. I opened it, knowing full well the wound it would reopen. The first picture was of Lisa and me, standing under an arch of sunflowers, both of us smiling like we had the world figured out. I didn't feel anger as I stared at it, just a deep, aching sadness. I closed the album and placed it in a box marked storage. Some memories didn't need to be erased, but they didn't belong in my everyday life anymore. Claire called me a few weeks later, her voice lighter than I'd ever heard it. "I signed the final papers today," she said. "It's official. Matt's out of my life." "Congratulations," I replied, meaning it. "How do you feel?" "Free," she said with a laugh. "It's weird, you know? For so long, I thought I couldn't live without him. Now I can't imagine living with him." "I get that," I said. "It's like shedding old skin." She paused for a moment before asking, "What about you? How are you doing?" I glanced around the room, at the new furniture, the fresh coat of paint, the space I was slowly making my own. Better, I said honestly. It's still a process, but I'm getting there. Well, if you ever want to grab coffee or something, she trailed off, leaving the invitation hanging. I'd like that, I said, a small smile creeping into my voice. The divorce finalized a month later. Lisa didn't fight the terms, probably because she knew she had no ground to stand on. The house, the majority of our savings, and even the car we'd bought together, all of it was mine now. Her last message came on the day the papers were signed. I hope someday you can forgive me. I stared at the words for a long time before replying. I already have, but I won't forget. And with that, I blocked her number. Life didn't magically get easier after that, but it did get lighter. I started going out more, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during my marriage. Josh and I picked up our old tradition of poker nights, complete with cheap beer and terrible snacks. I took up running again, something I hadn't done since college. The steady rhythm of my feet against the pavement became a kind of therapy, a way to clear my head and remind myself of my own strength. One evening, after a particularly grueling run, I found myself standing at the edge of a small park. The sun was setting, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink. I took a deep breath, the crisp air filling my lungs, and realized I felt good. Not just okay, not just surviving, but genuinely deeply good. Claire and I did meet for coffee and then dinner and then a walk along the river. It wasn't a romance, not yet, but it was something. Connection. A reminder that broken people can help each other heal. Do you ever think about what could have been? She asked one night, her voice soft. Sometimes, I admitted, but mostly I think about what could be, what comes next. She smiled, her eyes warm. Me too. Months turned into a year, and by the time the anniversary of Lisa's betrayal rolled around, it barely registered. The scars were still there, but they didn't define me anymore. One evening, as I stood on my back porch, staring up at the stars, I thought about everything I'd learned, about trust, resilience, and the power of letting go. Lisa's betrayal had shattered me, but it also forced me to rebuild, to strip away everything false and rediscover who I was. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living.